Entire villages submerged. But even before Tropical Storm Nang Ka struck this region, hundreds of thousands of families in central Vietnam were struggling to cope. 2 weeks of rain have left communities isolated. Many can only be reached by boat.
It is clear that close to 1 million people have been severely affected by this flood, and their homes submerged and livelihoods are destroyed.
Nang Ka is expected to drop up to 400 millimeters of rain on north and central Vietnam by Friday. 200,000 homes have already been flooded, along with rice fields that people depend on to earn a living. That's on top of hardships brought by the coronavirus.
These floods will continue to worsen the situation because of these provinces have already suffered from the long social lockdown. Many people have lost their livelihood and income in the past months or so.
Rescue workers are delivering food and other supplies in the worst affected provinces. In Tuat Thin Hay province, search and rescue teams are looking for survivors following a series of landslides. A landslide at a hydropower dam left some workers dead and others missing. A second landslide trapped rescuers trying to reach them. With more bad weather to come, many are concerned about what will happen in the days ahead. Andrew Chappelle, Al Jazeera.
Face-to-face in Bangkok, anti-government protesters and Thai police got into a violent confrontation 3 months in the making. The mostly peaceful demonstrations started in July, but for the second day, thousands ignored the risk of arrest under emergency decree issued the day before. As promised in an announcement just after the violence began, Thai authorities began using everything at their disposal to stop the protests, including water cannon with burning agent-laced blue water. The protesters are demanding a new constitution, reform of the monarchy, and the resignation of the cabinet, including Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, something he dismissed on Friday as he explained the reasons for the emergency order.
As you are all aware of the situation, the government must use the emergency decree. We have to proceed because the situation has become violent, with some things that have never happened before.
The protest started like the other 2 peaceful protests earlier in the week. Its location was changed at the last minute to confuse the security forces. They continued their call for the release of the top protest organizers who were arrested on Thursday morning. But about an hour into it, the police made their move. After several barricades were taken down and police advanced on the protesters, many tried to blend into the surrounding neighborhood.
Even though the leadership has officially called off the protest for the night, riot police are clearing out the area of the original site for that protest earlier in the evening. The big question now for the leadership is how do they move forward with the protests? Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, Bangkok.
Clashes on the streets of Abuja. A group of young men armed with clubs and other weapons arrive at a busy intersection, already cut off by protesters. They set about smashing parked vehicles. Then they chased protesters against police brutality. But the tables were turned when protesters chased their attackers, who began to retreat. Not all of them got away. The running battles lasted more than half an hour. Watched by the police less than 200 meters away, protesters say their attackers were brought to the scene in 2 trucks.
The government must listen to us. Don't touch us. We are peaceful protesters. We've not hurt anyone.
It's the demonstrators who turned around to help victims of their beating to parked ambulances.
Look at my car.
This woman's car was one of several badly damaged. The protest began peacefully in the morning as Nigerians of all ages pressed home their demand for accountability from government security forces. Nationwide rallies, which started last week against a notorious police unit implicated in extrajudicial killings and torture, succeeded in getting the government to abolish the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. But the announcement of replacement SWAT unit to fight violent crimes further angered protesters.
They should end SAS. We don't want him to dissolve it. We don't want him to form another name. They should end it. Enough is enough.
Now, how do the police deal with violent crimes like robbery, kidnappings and all that?
There are so many ways to deal with it. There are so many ways. It's not by killing people that criminality can be stopped in Nigeria. You can't kill everybody.
The latest protest disrupted traffic in businesses in parts of Abuja.
Demonstrators say police reform is just a part of their demands. They want to push further, to hold not only security agencies accountable, but to demand good governance from Nigeria's elected leaders.
In the country's most populous state, Lagos, protests were largely peaceful.
We have no reason to attack you because we have no reason to attack police. We have no reason to attack any protester for whatever reason we don't have.
But it's attacks such as these in Abuja, by what protesters say were paid thugs, that are raising particular concerns of instigating a new crisis in a country already dealing with several others, such as the coronavirus and Boko Haram. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Abuja.
The national anthem echoing on the street outside the president's home. Thousands of people came out to protest against the handling of the economy, the pandemic, and attempts to reform the judiciary. Mario Malatino says he's tired of seeing Argentina fail over and over again.
I'm sad. We have a beautiful country with 4 climates. We can feed millions of people, but we can't do it. What is wrong with us? My parents came as immigrants from Italy and they helped build this country. Argentina has been destroyed in the last 50 years. Every day we pay more taxes and more people live in poverty. Corruption, mismanagement and the political class are to blame.
The government says these protesters are trying to generate instability at an extremely difficult time in the country when there's a pandemic, unemployment and poverty levels are on the rise. But these people say they're here to denounce what they say is a parallel agenda to protect Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
In the past few months, and in spite of the pandemic, the government has tried to pass judicial reform and remove 3 judges involved in the trials of the vice president. Government supporters showed up at the president's residence to accuse the protesters of disrespecting Argentina's democracy.
They come here to sing the national anthem. They don't care about the country. They want to remove the president from office. We won the elections. People want Peronism because we help people eat. These people don't care about the poor.
In March, Argentina was one of the first countries in the region to impose a lockdown to prevent the spread of COVID-19. President Alberto Fernández enjoyed a 70% approval rating. But 7 months on, with infections on the rise and the economy in the red, the situation has changed.
The deadly tit-for-tat continues. Dozens of homes in Ganja were flattened in a missile strike at 3 a.m. local time. Children were among those killed or injured, according to Azeri authorities.
Yatırdı. Uşaqlar da televizyaya baxırdı. Onu gördüm bir şey siftədən güngül gəldi. Dedim amandı gəldilər. Elədim tik atıldım. Onu gördüm parıltı nətəri düşdüsə də bütün öyümüz eşiyimiz dağılıb.
At around the same time, the city of Mingyashevir, which has a strategic dam, also came under fire. This latest round of shelling came hours after an attack on the capital of the contested region of Nagorno-Karabakh, where most residents have fled, and life in this nearby village is bleak.
5 օր ամեն օր ժամը 7-ին խփում են այս գյուղի վրա։ Ես կողքի գյուղում եմ ապրում, 3 զանգեցի մահացածի եղբորը, չվերցրեցինք հեռախոսը ու անհանգստացա, ասի դե լավ նորմալ է, բան չկա, հետո 2 ժամից զանգեցին, որ մահացել է ճշտի մի հատ, նա զանգեցինք եղբորը, ասես մահացել է։
This fresh wave of violence comes despite international calls for peace talks and despite a ceasefire brokered last week. Hundreds of people have been killed so far in the conflict, which is the deadliest spate of violence since the war 30 years ago that left 30,000 people dead.
Coronavirus cases are spiking in Europe, forcing several countries to implement new COVID-19 lockdowns and other restrictions. Simon Bates takes a closer look in this weekend's edition of London Calling. And as always, Simon's opinions are just that, Simon's opinions.
It was the week when Europe wobbled. The European Parliament cancelled a session in Strasbourg. Travelling is dangerous, tweeted the Parliament's president. German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned that her country could be heading for disaster. In France, there's a nighttime curfew in Paris and 8 other cities. In Catalonia, Spain, bars and restaurants are now closed for a fortnight. And here in Britain, people are coming to terms with the seriousness of the situation, just as our politicians have started to fall out over how to deal with it. Northern Ireland has shut down for 4 weeks, while the Welsh want to ban entry to anyone from areas of high infection. Parts of the north of England are on the highest alert, and 9 million Londoners are on the watch list. The Speaker of the British Parliament has appealed to its older and more vulnerable legislators not to turn up and to join in virtual debates from home. But this was also the week when the Queen, at the age of 94, carried out her first public engagement outside a royal residence in 7 months. She visited a laboratory, noticeably without wearing a mask, but everyone she met had been tested. It was to show us all that life goes on.
Jacinda Ardern has much to celebrate. Not only has she won a second term as Prime Minister, she's on course to lead her party to a historic victory. If she does, it'll be the first time since New Zealand adopted a proportional representation voting system 24 years ago that a single party has won a majority in Parliament.
Now more than ever is the time to keep going, to keep working, to grab hold of the opportunities that lay in front of us. So let's step forward together. Ka hoake tono tātou. Let's keep moving.
But it was a bad night for the opposition centre-right National Party. Judith Collins, who only took over the party's leadership 3 months ago, said the scale of the defeat is sobering.
The National Party will take, we will reflect, we will take time to reflect, and we will review, and we will change. National will re-emerge from this loss a stronger, disciplined and more connected party.
Ardern's former coalition partner, New Zealand First, failed to pick up a single seat, ending the career of 75-year-old Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters, who was elected to Parliament more than 40 years ago. He blamed COVID-19 for drowning out every other issue. This election was widely seen as a test of Ardern's handling of the pandemic. The government took early action to control the outbreak, including announcing a nationwide lockdown when there were only 102 confirmed cases. She also won international praise for her handling of a mass shooting last year by a white supremacist, targeting 2 mosques in Christchurch, and her quick action to ban semi-automatic guns and assault rifles. Voters in this election have also been deciding on 2 referendums. The first on euthanasia. If approved, it'll give New Zealanders who meet the criteria the option of legally requesting help to end their lives.
Pope Francis has once again proposed transforming education into a creator of fraternity, peace, and justice. He did this in a video message prepared for a conference on the Global Compact on Education. The event was hosted by the Vatican at the Pontifical Lateran University in Rome.
Un tale investimento formativo basato su una rete di relazioni umane e aperte dovrà assicurare a tutti l'accesso a un'educazione di qualità, all'altezza della dignità della persona umana e della sua vocazione alla fraternità.
In his video message, the Pope invited global leaders, institutions, and educators to leave behind superficial approaches to education focused only on utility, standardized test results, functionality, and bureaucracy.
Che confondono educazione con istruzione e finiscono per atomizzare le nostre culture. Piuttosto ci è chiesto di perseguire una cultura integrale, partecipativa e poliedrica.
The Pope offered 7 key points for the future of education. These were respecting human dignity, listening to young people, promoting women's education, recognizing the importance of the family in education, including the vulnerable and marginalized, finding new ways of understanding the economy and politics, and protecting the environment. Among the speakers were the Director General of UNESCO, Audrey Azoulay, who said education is a common good that should be a catalyst for peace and solidarity, and the Prefect of the Congregation for Catholic Education, Cardinal Giuseppe Versaldi, who seconded the Pope's call for a new cultural model. Gathering global leaders and experts from all sectors, this event was the Pope's most ambitious for 2020, but it had been postponed because of the pandemic.
The abuse went on for years.
So you say you witnessed violence?
Yes, I saw violence and abuse of power.
Kamil Yarzembowski, a former altar boy, says he had to watch an older seminarian sexually abuse his roommate, also an altar boy.
I was terrorized. I didn't know what to do because I'm in the Vatican, you know, and these things are happening, and it was shocking for a young boy like me. I was 15.
A scandalous crime at a scandalous location.
Sex abuse in the Catholic Church is hardly new, but what is new, this is the first known case that the Vatican is criminally prosecuting, and that took place within these very walls.
The accused, Gabriele Martinelli, along with the victim and the witness, were all minors when the abuse started in 2007. They all lived together here at the Seminary of St. Pius X, where they helped with Mass at St. Peter's Basilica. The alleged abuse occurring right under the nose of Pope Francis's predecessor, Benedict XVI, says Father Anthony Figueiredo, a CBS Vatican consultant.
Is this a case of pedophilia?
It's a case of pedophilia in the sense that it does involve a minor and an adult man. Gabriele Martinelli was over the age of 18 when the abuse continued.
So this is very serious.
Oh, it's absolutely serious, and it's one of those zero tolerance policies that Pope Francis says he cannot allow anymore.
Serious charges, not only against the older seminarian, but against the former rector of the seminary, Reverend Enrico Radice, for allegedly covering it up. Yarzembowski, a key witness for the prosecution, says he not only reported the abuse to the rector, but also to some of the highest-ranking cardinals in the Vatican. Eventually, Yarzembowski says he was kicked out of the seminary, while the alleged abuser was made a priest. The trial could set a new precedent for victims and whistleblowers, changing the course of church sex abuse cases yet to come.
I think it's going to lead to more whistleblowers. I think it's going to lead to more people coming out and saying, we're going to get a hearing that is just.
The Pope visits Assisi to sign the third encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, Brothers All. There, he will celebrate a private Mass. He will explain the new document at the Angelus this Sunday, October 4th, on the Feast of St. Francis. At noon, he will publish the text. In the new encyclical, Pope Francis will call for solidarity, personal and community responsibility in the face of difficult challenges such as a pandemic, which has shown that the world is more connected than ever.
Tutti siamo fratelli. San Francesco de Assisi diceva tutti fratelli. E per questo uomini e donne di ogni confessione religiosa oggi ci uniamo nella preghiera e nella penitenza per chiedere la grazia della guarigione di questa pandemia.
In the document, the Pope will present the major proposals he launched during the pandemic, from working together to overcome the problem, to working together to get out of the crisis in better shape, and respecting nature to avoid this crisis. The text also reminds Catholics of the importance of the joint document on the human brotherhood that the Pope and the Imam of Al-Azhar signed in Abu Dhabi in 2019.
Every Wednesday, the Pope gives a catechesis during his general audience with pilgrims. For the past few weeks, he's been reflecting on the post-pandemic world. These meetings offer a sneak peek of his forthcoming encyclical on human fraternity, titled All Brothers, which he will sign in Assisi on October 3rd. Pope Francis says the pandemic has opened up another wound, the social gap caused by a sick economy. The Pope explains that selfishness transforms the Homo sapiens into a Homo economicus, in other words, an individualistic, calculating, dominating person. He invites people to ask themselves if they want to continue living that way.
Quando l'ossessione di possedere e dominare esclude milioni di persone e dai beni primari, quando la disuguaglianza economica e tecnologica è tale da lacerare il tessuto sociale e quando la dipendenza da un progresso materiale illimitato minaccia la casa comune, allora non possiamo stare a guardare. No, questo è desolante, non possiamo stare a guardare.
For Pope Francis, one key criterion of Christian authenticity is attention to people in need. That's why he invites the faithful to address the root causes of poverty. He says returning to normality must not mean returning to injustices.
La pandemia è una crisi e da una crisi non si esce uguali. O usciamo migliori o usciamo peggio. Noi dovremmo uscire migliori e per migliorare le ingiustizie sociali e il degrado ambientale. Oggi abbiamo un'occasione per costruire qualcosa di diverso. Per esempio, possiamo far crescere un'economia di sviluppo integrale dei poveri e non di assistenzialismo.
The Pope explains that the coronavirus has revealed our interconnectedness, that either we all emerge from the crisis together or we all continue in it.
Non è solo questione di aiutare gli altri, questo è bene farlo, e di più, si tratta di giustizia. La solidarietà oggi è la strada da percorrere verso un mondo post-pandemia, verso la guarigione delle nostre malattie interpersonali e sociali. Non ce n'è un'altra. O andiamo avanti con la strada della solidarietà o le cose saranno peggiori.
For now, the Pope has proposed 3 pillars: saying no to selfishness, spreading hope, and taking action. On October 3rd, his complete proposal for facing the post-pandemic world will be made public. In his third encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, meaning brothers all, the Pope compiles and categorizes the main proposals of the social discourses of his pontificate, in Rome and during his trips. He summarizes them in an encyclical to propose them as a solemn magisterium addressed to all Catholics. In front of global indifference and the temptation to detach ourselves from others, the Pope asks to remember that we are all in the same boat. He says the only option in front of the world's suffering and people's wounds is to follow the example of the Good Samaritan, who helps an injured man without worrying about who he is, what he believes, nor where he's from.
Essere capaci di avere compassione, questa è la chiave, questa è la nostra chiave. Se tu davanti a una persona bisognosa non senti compassione, se il tuo cuore non si commuove, vuol dire che qualcosa che non va. Stai attento, stiamo attenti. Non ci lasciamo trascinare dalla insensibilità egoistica.
The Pope asks to recognize the intrinsic dignity of every human being, who always deserves to be acknowledged, valued, and loved, regardless of individual ideas, feelings, practices, and sins. In Fratelli Tutti, the Pope warns against reductive anthropological visions and against a profit-based economic model that does not hesitate to exploit, discard, and even kill human beings.
La ambición desenfrenada de dinero que gobierna. Ese es el estiércol del diablo. El servicio para el bien común queda relegado.
The idea is that businessmen strive to create jobs for people, not for speculation. The Pope recalls the drama of migration. He is concerned about outbreaks of xenophobia and racism. He advocates for helping people in their native countries so that they aren't forced to leave. He also asks that society, including Christians, recognize that it is treating migrants as if they were less human.
Il Signore ci chiederà conto di tutti i migranti caduti nei viaggi della speranza. Sono state vittime della cultura dello scarto.
The Pope reiterates that war always leaves the world worse off than it was. He proposes looking at the effects war has on victims to really understand its gravity. He calls for stopping the proliferation of nuclear weapons and instead putting that money toward a global fund against hunger.
En el mundo de hoy, en el que millones de niños y familias viven en condiciones infrahumanas, el dinero que se gasta y las fortunas que se ganan en la fabricación, modernización, mantenimiento y venta de armas, cada vez más destructivas, son un atentado continuo que clama al cielo.
He also notes the change previously made to the Catechism of the Church, making the death penalty inadmissible in all cases. He says dialogue isn't merely about listening to the other's perspective, but about being able to admit that it may include legitimate convictions and concerns. It's an attitude, he says, people of all religions must adopt.
Sono chiamati figli di Dio coloro che hanno appreso l'arte della pace e la esercitano. Sanno che non c'è riconciliazione senza dono della propria vita e che la pace va cercata sempre e comunque.
That's why he says acting alone is not enough. Rather, he says it is essential to find ways to collaborate with others. Fratelli Tutti covers many other issues. The Pope asks that the religious perspective also be taken into account, as it is wrong when the only voices to be heard in public debate are those of the powerful and experts. He rehashes the value of kindness, and he warns against those who spread division, hatred, and distrust on the internet. He asks to recognize the goodness and beauty that God has sown in each of us. Inspiration for the encyclical came from Christian figures like St. Francis and Charles de Foucault, as well as non-Catholics like Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Mahatma Gandhi, and Ahmad al-Tayeb, the Sunni Muslim leader.